House Targaryen is, in my view, the most important family in the entire Song of Ice and Fire saga. Without this one family, there would be no Seven Kingdoms, no Kingsguard, no City Watch, no Red Keep, no King's Landing, no Iron Throne, and perhaps none of the intense political squabbling that occurs over the world's pointiest chair. In this video, I am going to relate the history of the Targaryens and how their dynasty shaped the world of the books that George R.R. Martin has written. This will be more of a brief overview of nearly 300 years of Targaryen rule over Westeros, as trying to do it in detail would take many, many hours. The Targaryens are a family of Valyrian heritage and originated from somewhere in the Valyrian Peninsula thousands of years before the events of the saga. They were one of 40 noble families from the Valyrian Freehold, but much suggests that they were one of the major houses of the Freehold and held very little power. Around the in-universe year of 114 BC, Aenar the Exile moved his family to the westernmost outpost of the Freehold, a small island in the narrow sea, and built the castle of Dragonstone after a prophetic dream by his daughter, Daenys the Dreamer. Sure enough, 12 years later, the doom occurred and Valyria was destroyed. While other Valyrians survived in colonies, the Targaryens remained the only dragon lords to survive the end of their civilization. 100 years later, Lord of Dragonstone Aegon Targaryen turned his sights westward and began to see conquest of Westeros as his family's future. Aegon Targaryen, who would later become known as the Conqueror, landed his forces at the spot where the capital of King's Landing would eventually be built. The Targaryens then set out to conquer the Seven Kingdoms that dominated the continent. Aegon first set his sights on Harren the Black, king of the Iron Islands and Riverlands, who had just completed the largest castle in all of Westeros, Harrenhal. When Harren refused to bend the knee, Aegon used his dragon, Balerion the Black Dread, to burn the castle, destroying Harren and all his heirs. With the allegiance of the Riverlanders, Aegon traveled to the Iron Islands and got the rest of the Ironborn to bow to his rule. Rhaenys Targaryen and Orys Baratheon, Aegon's closest friend, marched to Storm's End to bring down the last of the Storm Kings, Argilac the Arrogant. After slaying Argilac, Orys was rewarded with the Stormlands now belonging to him and his house. Visenya Targaryen flew to the Vale and was able to convince the Arryns of the Eyrie to bend the knee by making a subtle hint that her dragon might eat their young king Ronnell Arryn. All three Targaryens brought the Reach and the Westerlands to brink when they used their dragons to decimate the combined Lannister-Gardner army at the Field of Fire. Fearing what would befall his people, King in the North, Torrhen Stark, chose to bend the knee to Aegon rather than fight. Only Dorne, led by Princess Miriam Martell, refused to bow and would not join the Seven Kingdoms for another 100 years. As Westeros was a vast continent, rule of the realm was not always easy, and the Targaryens often faced many trials and challenges to their rule. One of the earliest was a conflict with the Faith of the Seven and their defenders, the Faith Militant, over the matter of the Valyrian custom of wedding brother to sister. This conflict also involved issues of polygamy, with Maegor the Cruel married not one, but 6 women, all in a vain hope to produce an heir. Years later, the question of succession came up when there were far too many Targaryens with claims on the Iron Throne. This would lead to the Great Council of 101 AC, which would make the critical and controversial decision to favor male heirs over females. Later, the actions of Daemon Targaryen, the Rogue Prince, would cause major rifts that would help lead to the greatest conflict for the Targaryens, a family civil war. Other issues arose when some Targaryen kings decided to bring Dorne into the realm by force, resulting in unsuccessful bloody wars as the Martells and their people lived up to the words unbowed, unbent, unbroken. The Targaryens also suffered when one of their own would produce insanity or cruelty, such as Aegon IV, known as the Unworthy, who upon his death legitimized all of his children born out of wedlock. This would lead to factions that would seek the Iron Throne for themselves at any price. This came primarily in the form of House Blackfyre, who would incite several rebellions over the decades with the express aim of claiming the Iron Throne. The last of these would coincide with the bloody War of the Nine Penny Kings, where a band of outlaws attempted to turn the Stepstones, a chain of small islands between Westeros and Essos, into a rogue kingdom. The end came with the reign of Mad King Aerys II and his actions that would see the undoing of his family. One of the most devastating issues the Targaryen faced was the civil war known as the Dance of the Dragons, in which King Aegon II and his half-sister Princess Rhaenyra tore the realm apart over which one of them had the right to sit the Iron Throne. The two sides were called the Greens and the Blacks, based on the color of the dresses Queen Alicent and Princess Rhaenyra once wore at a tournament. Their father, King Viserys, had originally stated that Rhaenyra was heir, but Aegon's mother, Queen Alicent of House Hightower, objected to this for several reasons. One was that the Great Council 101 AC had stated the oldest male child would be the heir to the Iron Throne, regardless if a daughter was born earlier. The other was that Rhaenyra purportedly had tried to seduce Knight of the Kingsguard Sir Criston Cole into violating his vows, and that her legitimate children with Sir Laenor Velaryon were actually the product of an affair with Sir Harwin Strong. Rhaenyra had also married her uncle, the troublesome Prince Daemon Targaryen, who had been a thorn in the king's side for years. The two sides attempted political avenues at first, but that quickly devolved into bloodshed. Within a few short years, most of the Targaryens and their dragons were dead. Aegon II would be declared victor, but died mysteriously short thereafter. Rhaenyra's only surviving child, Aegon III, and Aegon II's only surviving child, Jaehaera, were wedded as the new royal couple. The conflict that would bring an end to nearly 300 years of Targaryen rule is known both as Robert's Rebellion and the War of the Usurper. This stems mainly from many in the Seven Kingdoms growing weary of King Aerys II's increasing madness. The catalyst came when Prince Rhaegar Targaryen took off with Lady Lyanna Stark of Winterfell, who was betrothed to Lord Robert Baratheon of Storm's End. Robert wanted revenge and was soon joined by the Starks, the Arryns, and the Tullys, after Aerys II had Lord Rickard Stark and his eldest son Brandon executed for no logical reason. Lord John Arryn of the Eyrie joined Robert because he refused to kill him and Eddard Stark because he had mentored the two as lords. The Tullys became involved when Eddard Stark married Catelyn Tully, who had been betrothed to Eddard's brother Brandon. Now some in the Seven Kingdoms would come to believe that Lyanna had willingly gone with Rhaegar, as the two had fallen in love for real. Lord Mace Tyrell of Highgarden remained loyal to the Iron Throne, but only went so far as to lay siege to the Baratheon keep of Storm's End. Aerys II's closest ally, Tywin Lannister, refused to become involved in the war until after Prince Rhaegar had been killed in battle against Robert. At that point, Lord Tywin marched the entire Lannister army to King's Landing and revealed his allegiance to Robert by sacking the city and ordering every remaining member of the royal family be executed. Only Prince Viserys and Princess Daenerys, who had just been born, appeared to survive. By the beginning of the series, only a handful of Targaryens are still alive, and a couple of them are not necessarily actual Targaryens. The two youngest children of Aerys, the second Viserys and Daenerys, lived in exile in Essos, moving from place to place to avoid assassins sent by King Robert Baratheon. Viserys inevitably betrothed his sister to the most powerful warlord in Essos, Khal Drogo of the Dothraki. However, he underestimated his sister completely. After becoming confident in her role as Khaleesi, Daenerys became the one determined to claim the Iron Throne, and Viserys got himself killed by the overprotective Drogo. Daenerys also successfully hatched 3 dragon eggs, making her the first of her family with dragons in over a century. She would eventually conquer Slaver's Bay, freeing all of its slaves and beginning her preparations for invading Westeros, earning names like Stormborn, Mother of Dragons, and Breaker of Chains. Meanwhile, a young squire called Young Griff, working with the sellsword company, the Golden Company, proclaims to be Aegon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar. His supporters claim that he was switched the night of the sack of King's Landing with another child and was taken to safety by Lord John Connington. The theory is that Griff may be not a Targaryen, but actually a Blackfyre, since that supposed extinct house was long associated with the Golden Company. Finally, there is Jon Snow, the illegitimate child of Eddard Stark. Many fans believe, and the TV adaptation went with this idea, is that Jon is actually the son of Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen, who may have legally wed in secret. If this is true, it gives the sworn brother of the Night's Watch a claim to the Iron Throne. Speaking of the Night's Watch, aged Master Aemon is also a Targaryen, but gave up his claim decades earlier in becoming a maester. One last Targaryen would be the old three-eyed raven that trains Brandon Stark to take his place, for he was born Brynden Rivers, the illegitimate son of Aegon IV, and was known as Bloodraven. If you would like a more detailed history of the Targaryens, then I invite you to check out these books from the Volusia County Public Library. First, there is The World of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin, Elio M. Garcia Jr., and Linda Antonsen, which relates a basic history of the known world, the line of Targaryen kings, Robert's rebellion, and descriptions of the Seven Kingdoms and other lands in the world. The other book is Fire and Blood by George R.R. Martin. It's the first volume of two-volume series about the Targaryen dynasty. The first book covers everything from Aegon's conquest to the end of the regency of King Aegon III. These titles are available through the Volusia County Public Library in person and through our downloadable services Hoopla and Overdrive. I will be doing a second part on the Targaryens in order to give more detail about those of this house who were mad and those who actually did some good for the people of Westeros. Join us next time as we return to the galaxy far, far away for a look at the Mandalorian. Goodbye, and always remember, winter is coming.